I'm very suspicious of those ones that are stamped out in bulk, and I would just as soon use legit welding filter.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a whole bunch of those glasses I saved from 2017, so I'm all set.
I've got glasses I saved from 2012.
There you
go. Yeah, but actually the batter film is probably the best stuff.
Yeah, there's good ways to protect yourself for sure.
We
So
had
Gary,
purchased some glasses for 12 as well. We had a partial eclipse here, if I remember right, in 2012.
Right.
About 2/3 or something like that.
Gary, are you going to try to get into the path of the annular, or are you
yeah, right. I think so. My wife's brother's fiance, we'll call her. Her family lives in Dublin, Texas, and they live on a farm, and they know we're interested in watching the eclipse and so forth. We were in Wyoming also for the last big one, and we had quite a few people from the family show up, and so we're all going to go down to Texas, I think, and watch it down there. Did you get that?
I did. Thank you.
Okay.
I can't decide if I want to actually go down to Southwest Colorado and the San Juans and catch it there, which the weather that time of the year can be, or just go down to New Mexico.
Well, I was surprised. I didn't think that it was something I would be interested in at all. And a friend convinced me to give it a try. And I was surprised how much I noticed just from the temperature change and the birds and bugs and crickets and everybody else realizing it was changing from night to day to night and back again. And everything. I was very surprised at how interesting that was. And we were just here in town, but even so, there was quite a bit to notice. I was very, very surprised.
Greatest show on earth.
It is. I just want to see if can everybody see my screen? Is it working or?
Yeah.
Yep. We got it.
I'm having a little trouble with my pixelation problem I've had before, so we'll see how it goes. Just want to go through real quick our agenda tonight. Darren, you don't have any minutes for January's meeting, right? Not yet.
I was just looking. I've kind of been out of it, so I know I've got some minutes I need to get cleaned up and posted.
No worries. So we're a little bit behind on that. We'll just go through and hit everybody here just real quick. I don't know if Mark's going to make it tonight. He has quite a work schedule these days, and so he might not, but we'll talk about what he needs to talk about. Just a reminder to anybody, please renew your membership for 2023. And there's a link at the website and on the front page. And if you have any questions, just let me know. We'll go through the old business here when I get a chance to talk about it, and we'll talk about Mark's FMP, and we'll go to Gary and those guys in just a little bit. We'll tell you about our status with the 501c3. We're going to visit with Matt tonight, and I noticed that Bill and Glenn are both here. Bill's here, right? Yeah, Bill's there. Is Glenn on? I don't see Glenn on here tonight, but Bill has joined us as well, so we're going to do that. Is there anything else that we need to cover tonight that you might have? And then the next meeting will be on March 23rd. And this particular page is up on the website. If you go to our club and meeting information, and you can click on February 2023 and get the same document. So there you go. All right. So we don't really have any additions that I've heard from anybody, and we'll get to the minutes. We'll get those posted and review them at some point. But don't worry, we're not in a major hurry. Darren, do you have anything else to throw in tonight? Start with you on the list here.
No, I'm just getting back on my feet and getting re-engaged with everything.
Okay, very good. I think that yeah, there's been a lot going on for Darren. He's been in illness and illnesses, so he's doing well, getting much better. Communications Director Mark Holbrook, are you on here, Mark? I don't see him. So I know that Mark is going to be working on the frequency measurement practices. We're going to also do this with David Kasdan, 88Y, and then John N0OBJ, and David VE3EI, if you want to get involved in this a little bit too. We are talking about doing our FMPs. We have some dates set. Those are going to be, we're going to do it for 4 consecutive Wednesdays in the month of March. And so those will be March 8th, 15, 22, and then 29. And we're going to do this with a Zoom like we're doing right now. And we'll have people with their radios on. And John will share his screen, and we'll have the opportunity for people to practice and tune things in. We're going to ask everybody to have FL Digi installed already. That's sometimes one of the biggest hurdles. And also to have it configured. Hopefully it's talking to the radio and things like that. And there are some good online guides to making sure that FL Digi is up and running. So we do have a web page for this. If you're going to go to our website, I'm not going to share the screen again, but we have there's our menu across the top is a black bar with white tags, home, join, our club, events. And one of them is frequency measurement. And so if you click on frequency measurement, it will then drop down and you'll see a little bit about the dates and what we're trying to plan for the FMP. So we're going to take the approach of using a computerized way to do this for the first couple of weeks at least. And so we're going to be promoting FL Digi over WSJTX, but there's some good tools in there, and we think that everybody can be very successful with it. So we're going to give that a try for this FMP. And so that's the word for Mark.
Dave, did you say that's going to start the first week of March?
That will it'll be not March 1st, but it will be on the night of the 8th, and that will be in the middle of our operating event. So we'll have somebody operating, and people can talk to the operating event. But we'll have this FMP tune in because we'd like to spread it out over the month to be able to get people in. There will be 1 hour and a half of overlap at. We're going to do it at 9 o'clock Eastern time, so it'll be 7 o'clock in Mountain time. And so we'll just do that for like 1 hour, and then we'll come back and have a chance. People can come back the next week, and we'll elaborate on that approach. John N0 or N8OBJ is going to write this whole thing up, and I'm going to be reviewing it, and Mark will as well. And would like to talk to Dave, VE3EI, to talk about looking at possibility of doing it also with his method. So using the audio and tuning and everything. His system is pretty good. Dave, you've been working on a new write-up, is that right?
Yes, I am. And I've been working on the illustrations today. So it's coming together quite nicely.
Okay, very good. Very cool. Well, I'll be talking to you, I'm sure, about that. And when do you travel to Colorado? Are you here early next week?
Next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, okay. I heard there might be some snow coming, so hopefully you get here before the snow.
I hope so too.
Yeah. You guys are taking the brunt of the cold, I think, or it's heading your way at least. We were minus 13 this morning. Is that what it was in Colorado? I think it was something like that. And
That's what I remember
Really
hearing.
cold. Yep.
yeah, it was cold, and it's going to be balmy tonight. It's going to be 0, so we'll be okay. Anyhow, just anybody traveling, be aware next week is going to be one of those times. Any other questions about this? We'll get more information out, and we've got a week or so, and we're going to be utilizing the website quite a bit for that. And we'll update everybody with an email at some point. Tim, you want to fill us in on where we are with Treasurer's report? Whoops, you're still muted.
Did you want to put it on the screen? You want me to just talk through it? Either way is fine.
I could try to put it on screen. Let me see if I can get to it.
I mean, it's nothing earth shattering. I can just talk through it.
Okay.
So we had in the last 2 months, all of our major expenses. In December, we pay our insurance through the ARRL. And then in January, we paid for hosting of our website and we paid for our Zoom account. And then in February, which isn't, we haven't posted the February report yet, but in February, we did spend the budgeted application fee for the 501c3. And we have been granted our 501c3 status. So we're now official that we're a 501c3 tax deductible charity. So we got 703 left after the end of January, but that application fee I think was 245. So we're down to about 500 in the account as of today, and don't anticipate any major expenses the rest of the year. We're kind of front loaded on our expenses. We pay for most of the stuff at the beginning of the year. And also just in full disclosure, you'll see on there, there was an error. I accidentally paid for something with the club's PayPal account. As soon as I found that, I reversed it and paid for it myself and flushed all my cookies and got rid of any persistent logins with PayPal. So sorry about that.
Well, that's never happened to anybody else.
Well, I discovered I wasn't even, I thought that I just used my wrong password manager and it was just a persistent login. I paid for something with PayPal, clicked the easy button and didn't even realize it came out of the wrong PayPal account. So you know how that goes.
It is really easy to spend money with PayPal. I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
It's really easy. The other
everybody pay your dues because we received as of January 220 out of our budgeted. I think we budgeted 800 in dues, something like that.
So 220 is not too many people joining the club yet. So if you haven't renewed your membership, please do, and we'll start bugging people rapidly here when we run out of money. So just be
Tim,
prepared.
did you get the renewal that came in this morning?
I did.
Good.
And we do have our electronic system up and running, so it is working. And then if you prefer to send it by mail, you're always welcome to do that. Let's see. Kevin, do you have anything?
Dave, if I might interrupt, this is David N1HAC.
Hi,
I was
David.
wondering, I can't find the online membership. How does one get to that?
If you go to WWVARC.org
Right.
and go to the website, there should be a link on the side that says join.
Well, that takes it to the thing that says there's no electronic, you have to fill out the form.
Uh-oh. Darren?
I'm on it right now. I'm looking. There should still, there's a time to renew your membership link there.
He's looking at the join page, so he needs to go back to the home page. Is that right?
If you're on the home page, there's a news item there that says time to renew, and that should have the correct links in it.
And we do need to update the links on the join page, obviously.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you.
And David would love to have you join us. That would be great. So thanks for asking and poking around. Kevin, was there anything you want to throw in?
Not at this point, not that we aren't already going to talk about.
Okay. So as far as the old business goes, I'll just go ahead. We've been busy. I've been busy and running around getting things ready for our next weekend. That'll be the 2nd through the 4th of March. And the agenda is on the flyer that I think I attached to everybody's email today. Is that correct? I hope so. And so you can get that also on the website. Oops, hold on.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
All right. Right at the very top up here, it says next meeting. And so you can say, click and download the flyer right here. And hopefully it pops up. Can you guys see the flyer?
Yes.
All right. So again, we've got the event on Thursday. We sort of made this the flyer just to lead off and push Thursday night. We're going to have 2 presentations from Glenn Nelson from the WWV staff, and then also from David Kasdan and Rachel Bodecker, and Aidan Monter from NIST Boulder and Hamsci as well. And so they're going to have 2 different talks on that Thursday evening. Seating is limited. The museum would like people to register. So if you're going to be in Fort Collins and you could register for this, that would be great. Just follow that link, the bit.ly link, WWV ARC after that, and it takes you to the reservation site for the museum. And then on Friday, NIST has opened up their doors to give us tours of WWV and WWVB in Fort Collins, and then also the Boulder Lab. Registration for this is required if you're going to be here in Colorado. We need to have that registration done by Monday, the 27th, because I have to turn everybody's name in on the 28th to NIST so that they can run it through their security. And so it's very important if you're going to be in Fort Collins, if you would like to go on one of these tours, we highly recommend that you go to the same bit.ly site and sign up. The tours are 9 o'clock to 11 and 3 to 5 in the afternoon at both sites. And the WWV tour in the morning is actually filling up. In the afternoon tour, it's not. And likewise, it's the other way around for Boulder. The morning tour is not filling up, but the afternoon tour is. So I think a lot of you are going to WWV and then going back down to Boulder is probably the plan, which I think makes sense. So that is what's going on. And then on Saturday, the 4th, is going to be our event at the museum, where we're just going to be showing off ham radio all day long from 10 until 3 in the afternoon. We've got participation from many of our local clubs. The Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club, Estes Valley, is going to be there doing an ISS, Amateur Radio on the International Space Station talk and demonstration. They just had a very successful one. The Shiwai Club will be there, and they're going to be doing some demos from the roof of our building, we hope, from the roof of the museum. That'll be RJ and Doug. How you guys? Good to see you here. Also, Colorado Aries R1D1. We're going to have the Boulder Amateur Radio Club. They're not going to give a talk, but they're going to demonstrate fast scan amateur radio TV. Hamsci is going to also give a presentation. So we've got a lot of stuff going on that Saturday, which will be fun. And then Fred and Gary, do you want to talk about the upcoming frequency celebration that starts on March 6th?
Well, Fred's done a lot of the work, so maybe he can do some of the talking. I'm not sure.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I guess I'm on here.
Yep.
Well, on the heels of the event in Fort Collins and Boulder, we will be presenting a special event station to celebrate the start of WWV broadcasting standard frequency transmissions, which occurred 100 years ago, 1923 in March. We're going to do, I guess, a similar on-air event to what we've done in the past. We'll be operating stations from home. You sign up on a spreadsheet, have to be a club member to operate. There is a shared Google Drive that you have to access, and there's only 2 documents in that folder. There's an operator's guide that gives you a background on the event and why we're celebrating. And there is a sign-up spreadsheet, which is a pretty big document. We're running for an entire week. So we're starting on March 6th, 0000, which is Sunday evening, right at the end of the ARR International DX contest. So the contest ends and we will be starting then that Sunday evening, and we'll run for 7 days or run through the following Sunday. All bands, all modes. So the worksheet allows you to sign up in 1 hour increments for any particular band, and then one of 3 modes. You can operate CW, voice, phone, or digital. And we encourage everybody, so we've got literally thousands of hours in there that you could sign up to operate. We'd like to have enough presence so people can find us. And I think the operator's guide will give you background and some links so you can talk to people on air about WWV and why we're celebrating. And I encourage all of you to operate, because I think you're going to have a great time if you haven't done this in the past. I was very taken during our October event with a number of people that talked about how WWV had affected their life, maybe as a young ham. And I related the same thing too. It was one of the first things I listened to with my first shortwave receiver that I built. In fact, it was about the only thing, because it was about all it would pick up. But I wasn't a very good builder back in those days. So I would encourage you. You have to have access to the Google Drive. If you're not already signed up on there, send me an email. Either Gary or I, and we can get you access to that drive. Just send it to my call sign, W9KEY@ARRL.net. And all I have to do is put you on the approved list, and you can get into that directory. And Dave just popped the spreadsheet up here. There it is. So this is 1 day's worth. And again, we've got columns. The colored columns are the different bands. And within each band, you can run CW, digital, or voice. And it's not scrolling properly, unfortunately. It's scrolling off the screen, but on the left-hand side, pan back, there you go. If you get the active one, the columns and rows should freeze for you, but you'll see both UTC time and mountain time on the left. Be a little careful for the last day, because this changes, and because we go into daylight savings time on the 12th, which is the last day. So just pay attention to when you sign up. And again, you sign up in 1 hour blocks. So we've got a lot of open space to fill. Hope everybody can make it on and be on as often as you wish. Now, this worksheet is not only available to be written into on the Google Drive, but it can also be viewed only. A read-only document is on the WW0WWV QRZ page. So you can reference people to that web page for both QSL information, and they can see who's operating at what period of time. They can't write into that sheet.
So for right now, we just have
cool.
right here on the front, and we'll make it
works.
But you click on that, and that'll open up that spreadsheet, and it's a view. It's a people can verify that who's operating is actually listed in our operators schedule.
What I found is please, if you do sign up, please try to honor that commitment. If something comes up, well, then go into the spreadsheet, erase your name so somebody else can take that spot. I found that, being a little bit conservative, you don't sign up for more things than you think you can operate. But there were times I get done with a shift, maybe I had 1 or 2 hours, and I said, hey, I still feel pretty good. Somebody was filling in after me on the band that I was on, but you can look at that sheet in real time and sign up for a different band that might be operating, or a different mode. And it's kind of intoxicating, and I ended up spending too much time, but I had a good time doing it. So
Fred had you had 450 sideband contacts. So you talked to 450 different people in less than 48 hours. So that was a pretty, that's a record. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I talked until I couldn't anymore, and Bob knows that takes quite a bit to but I finally ran out of voice, and I had to quit. So
all right, very good. Well, so we've got that event coming up. That's about it. I mean, that's our stuff you need to know. And let me get back to the agenda here.
I suppose the one
I didn't think of it. I didn't think of it until now. But if Bill or Matt wants to work, we ought to probably try to put their call signs in bold or something, because I suspect they'd generate a pretty good pileup if people really knew who was on operating. But I'll leave that up to you guys.
I'll talk them into it. We'll get it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. we talked about the FMPs in March, so that we're getting to that, and you can go check that out. Mark Holbrook, WS7M, and I, and Bob, if he's available, we're going to go to the museum on Monday afternoon and set up a radio. And so we've got a high gain 640 vertical antenna, and we're going to be using a Flex 6600, a PGXL, and a TJXL tuner along with it. So it's a very nice radio setup, and we will test that out on Monday and make sure it works for the weekend. As Tim mentioned to you, we got our 501c3 approval, which is really kind of a neat thing. And thanks to Tim for doing all the filling out of the paperwork. He got all the ducks in a row. And we did the easy form, which is a heck of a lot easier than going through all the other forms. So we were able to do it ourselves, and it was really fun to find that letter in the mailbox yesterday. So we were good. So we'd like to go and hand this over to Kevin. Kevin, you want to introduce our guest speaker for this evening?
Sure. I don't know if this is back to our business for just a moment. Any of you that are coming out here for the event, especially for Saturday, we are kind of looking for folks that can help with both operating the local station that we've got and at the museum, and for being interpreters for people that are walking through and wondering what's going on, to get explanations of things. So there's certainly going to be plenty of room for people if any of you are coming and would be interested in doing that, and you're not already involved in your own demos or things like that. And I guess that's appropriate announcement to make here. Dave, is there anything else we're needing help with at this point?
Not really yet. I mean, I'll probably figure it out tonight.
Other than we need some local folks. but
there is one little bit of business that I totally forgot about, and Tim and I discussed this. We would like to be able to provide some sustenance to the people that are coming and showing off ham radio. And we didn't budget for this. And so of the people that are at our meeting that are current members of our club, I would like to make a motion that perhaps that we could put, I'll put a motion out that we could spend $200 of our money that we have to get some sustenance, like drinks and some food for the guys that are coming in.
I'll second the motion.
Thanks, RJ. Since you're coming down and you want to have some food, I get it.
Hey, don't call me out like that.
Any discussion? Seems like a reasonable thing.
They don't have any problem with. I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask: is the museum okay with you taking food and drink into their?
Oh, they have a little. They suggested it. So they have a little room off to the side that people could go and get some drinks, and we can order a couple pizzas when they're hungry. They can go get some pizza and things like that. So
very cool.
All right. Any other discussion? All right. Well, thumbs up, thumbs down. Everybody okay with that? I see more thumbs up, and you guys that don't have your pictures on. There you go. Thanks, Alan. So
thumbs up here. I'm driving.
Okay, yeah. There's a thumbs up. I'm glad you guys know how to run these Zoom things. This is great. All right. So
if you'd have told me there was going to be free food, I might have come out there.
Well, your wife's here already, right?
She is. Yeah.
All right. There you go. Well, Kevin, I'm going to hand it to you.
Okay. Well, I was referred to Matt several years ago by our local radio club when I was looking for programs and that sort of thing, to see if there might be any chance that we could get a tour of WWV. It turns out that we found out that we had been in college together and in the same dorm together. We found that out after we'd been talking, but Matt was gracious enough to give us not only one tour, but 3. And now we're getting more of those. So we've had fun getting acquainted with WWV, and that's kind of where a lot of this whole thing started. So Matt was gracious enough to join us tonight and answer a lot of our questions. Matt, I don't have much else to say, so take it away. And I'm sure that you won't have any shortage of questions with what you've already got and what people might want to ask as we go along.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you, Kevin and Dave. Dave, I did want to remind you, you asked me to remind you that I paid my dues at the Lark Fest for this year. So hopefully it's been applied to my
Oh yeah,
account.
you and Ivan both gave me $20 right there, so that was great.
Yep. Okay. All right. Just wanted to follow up on that. So so yeah, my name is Matt Deutch, N0RGT. I'm the engineer at WWV and WWVB. I've been a radio amateur since 1992, soon after they got rid of the code requirement, because it just, I never could get the code. I tried for years to learn code. Maybe I was doing it the wrong way, but never clicked with me. So as soon as that requirement was gone, I was in there. I'm originally from New York, and when I was about 11 years old, my family moved to Longmont, Colorado, and I grew up my junior high and high school years there. Started out, my interest in radio was my parents gave me a AM radio for Christmas one year, and became very interested in the clear channel stations and the amazing distance that they were traveling to my radio, and was fascinating to me, which led me to purchase a Sears and Roebuck multi-band radio, so I could listen to shortwave. And of course, came across WWV quite easily, and WWV was just up the road, so it was easy for me to get all the frequencies. And there was a 25 megahertz at that time, but my receiver did not go that high, so I never heard the 25 megahertz. But it did introduce me to WWV, and that was just sort of a, I was more interested in the London and Berlin and Moscow and all those things. But I did annoy everyone in the family by setting clocks constantly to the WWV signal. So after that, after my high school years, I joined the Coast Guard to get electronics technician training. And so that's where my background in electronics came from. And while I was on board the cutters, we used to patrol from California up to the Bering Sea, and the quartermaster used to set the clocks, the chronometers on board using WWV. And so, I'd tell everyone, "Oh, I grew up just a few miles from that radio station," and of course they weren't very impressed. But when I went ahead to school at CSU after I got out of the Coast Guard, got my electrical engineering degree, and my wife found a classified ad in the Coloradoan, the Fort Collins paper, with an opening at WWV. So I applied, and they were willing to take a chance on me. So that's how I got into the station, and that was in 1989. So just as a background, I want to tell people, take a quick drink here. If you're not familiar with the site, there are 2 radio stations at the Fort Collins site, WWV, which is the well-known one, and then WWVB, which is the lesser known one. WWV, of course, is the VH or the HF station that broadcasts across the shortwave band, and from 2.5 up to 25 megahertz. And then WWVB is the LF site. That's a 60 kilohertz, and that's more familiar to people who have the radio controlled clocks on their walls or wristwatches and so on. There was a WWVL, which was a 20 kilohertz station that was on the site in Fort Collins here until 1972. It was an experimental station, and yeah, they decided they were going to build a bigger VLF 20 kilohertz station at the site, but those plans never really materialized. And of course, then everyone knows about the WWVH in Hawaii, which is our sister station HF site out in Hawaii. And they broadcast not as many frequencies. They broadcast on 2.5 megahertz, 5, 10, and 15 megahertz. So not as many frequencies, but they do cover a good part of the HF band. So I have been working at the station since, like I said, 1989. I've been there 34 years as of this June, which is pretty close to 1/3 of the history of the station. You know, if the station's 100 years old, I'm getting pretty close to being working there for a third of that time. And for WWVB, I think it's pretty close to half the time that that station's been around. So I'm getting to be one of those old timers that you always hear about. And one of the questions here was about what changes do you think were the most important that occurred during this time? And I'd have to say WWV and VB have, I don't want to say they've had a bad history of staff. They obviously had a lot of very talented people that built the station, kept it running, and there were some interesting stories that came from the old timers that we took over from, but I've been blessed with a very knowledgeable, hardworking staff that we currently have. Everyone very knowledgeable, electronics, mechanical stuff. We have to do wear a lot of different hats at the radio station. You know, a lot of, you know, from driving tractors to, you know, for snow removal to, you know, repairing a lot of things, welding, knowing how to use, you know, various tools that you wouldn't associate with electronics necessarily. And in addition, knowing the oscilloscopes, voltmeters, and safety that goes along with all of that. Some of the big events that took place while I've been here at the radio station is that 1992, we had a heavy freezing mist that accumulated on our antenna, the WWVB antenna. And that mist froze and accumulated, and the top hat of the antenna slowly began to sag, and that detunes the antenna. And it's a common event during the winter time to have something like that happen. But what usually happens is later that day, the freezing mist stops, sun comes out, melts it, everything's fine. But this was different in that it went on for 3 days. It distorted the antenna to the point where we couldn't tune anymore, and it actually, the transmitter shut down because we had so much reflected power. So we were off the air for about 30 hours, which made a lot of people very unhappy. It was embarrassing to NIST, and we tried a lot of different things to get the station back on the air, and it was determined that the whole system was going to have to be reconfigured or you know, find out some way to get around, you know, if that icing problem ever happened again. So that led to about $1 million became available for an upgrade. And we, to make a long story short, over the course of about 4 years, we're able to increase or replace the transmitters we had. Were very old and there were no schematics for them. It was pretty much on the job training, learning how to use them. And we replaced those transmitters. The Navy gave us some surplus transmitters that had been used during the Cold War for submarine communications. And we got several of those at little to no cost, mainly for shipping, installed them ourselves by and large, and increased the output of power of WWVB from 10 kilowatts up to about 70 kilowatts. We also got some new time code generators for both stations, which was very nice because a time code generator is a unit that takes the precise 5 megahertz input and turns it into a time code, and all the information that you receive or decode for like 60 kilohertz is embedded in that code. And then the time code generators of WWV are the ones that have the voice announcement, the ticks, the tones, everything you hear. So they take the 5 megahertz input and turn it into the information that's sent to the transmitters. And when I first arrived, a lot of the functions like daylight saving time were not automated. You had to come out on that Saturday before daylight saving time, and didn't happen very often, but it's that time of year that spring snowstorms can occur. And we did have some problems in the past with snowstorms. Recently, just about 2 years ago on daylight saving time, big snowstorm knocked the station off the air, and then the generator didn't start. So that's the kind of disasters you can have. But now that a lot of that is automated, the time code generators allow us to set the daylight saving time, and we can stay home and just make sure it transitions over. And one of the other things that I think a lot of people, may not seem like a major accomplishment, but it got a lot of people's attention, was the 25 megahertz going back on the air. There was a gentleman in Chicago, Dean Lewis, Whiskey 9, Whiskey Golf Victor, who is now a silent key, unfortunately. He contacted me back in, I think it was 2013, and he worked at some business, and he'd have a smoke break like a couple times a day, go out and smoke a cigarette, and he had a little tiny shortwave radio that he would keep in his shirt pocket. And while he was out there for his smoking break, he would listen to shortwave, tune through the bands to see what was going on. And the solar cycle was doing quite well at the time. And so he would say, "Oh, I hear the 20 megahertz quite well." He said, "Boy, I sure do miss. I remember the days of the 25 megahertz. I sure do wish we had that back again." And as and a lot of some other people have said that type of thing before, wish the 25 megahertz. But in this situation, things were different because Bill Yates, one of the technicians, had acquired some HF transmitters for us, and we had a spare transmitter, and also had a different way of modulating, the amplitude modulation for the signal. And Bill said, "Well, let's put it on the air for a day, make the guy happy, And I said, "Okay, that sounds fine to me." And so I tried to contact the broadcast manager that day. He was actually at a Rockies game, so I couldn't get a hold of him. But so we thought we would just ask for forgiveness, rather than permission. And so we put it back on the air, and I sent him an email to Mr. Lewis and told him, it was on the air, but he never saw the email. And so a couple days later, I wrote to him and said, "Did you see the?" He's like, "No, I didn't see your email." And so I didn't know it was on. I missed it. So we put it back on again for him, and he was very excited. And he said, "Well, you've got to tell QST magazine. I've got some other friends that want to hear it. So can you leave it on a little longer?" And we're like, "Yes, we can." And word got out, and a lot of people started writing to us saying, "Oh, please, leave it on a little longer," so on and so forth. And we said, "Okay, well, we'll leave it on." And what was going to be just for a few days turned into a few weeks, and here we are. Almost 10 years later. It was April of 2014 when we did that. So it's been on the air almost 10 years now, and still get a lot of people writing to us. The 20 megahertz almost gets ignored now. If people can hear the 25, they let us hear or let us know that that's the one that's coming in. So very popular now. So it's no one's complained. To my knowledge, there's no other 25 megahertz stations out there other than Espoo in Finland. I tried to contact them and let them know we were going to be on the air for a little while, but never heard back from them. And they were doing only 100 watts, I think, at the time. So I think theirs was mainly just local for people in Finland, in Espoo, or in Finland. So no one seemed to complain or mind, so we cranked it up a little bit more and a little bit more here and there. So we're back at the original 2.5 kilowatts that 25 megahertz was originally at. And that went off the air in 1977 to save electricity. I remember was the reason they gave. If you folks remember the good old days of the energy crisis and oil embargoes and so on and so forth back in those days. So let me scroll down here and find another question. Let's see. Is there anyone have any questions or comments on the items I just went over? Any clarifications needed?
I actually wrote this one down. So are you still calling that the 25 megahertz experimental?
Yes, we are. In the sense we left it as experimental, which was a way of saying we could shut it off anytime we wanted to or needed to. If vacuum tubes are very expensive these days, and certainly any vacuum tubes we needed for other transmitters would take priority. And also one thing I was going to talk about later on was that we have had people interested in a circular polarized 25 megahertz signal to help study the ionosphere. And so that was the other thing we wanted to do, is if we had to change the polarization, we would be able to say, well, it falls under the umbrella of experimental. We're going to change from vertical to circular, something like that. And so I've been in contact with a few people who wanted to do some experiments. And so I just wanted to leave the door open so that if we did anything that people asked what was going on, we'll say, well, it's an experiment, So that was the idea of calling it experimental.
I want to say there are enough of us who are into, who want the 25 megahertz on the air. If you had trouble getting parts, I'll bet you could take up a collection.
Oh yeah, that would be nice.
Yep.
Yeah. If only we could take up a collection. The government doesn't let us take money unless it's they don't accept donations very well. They rather take the money, I guess, as taxes, but they don't accept a donation very well. So
if a pair of transmitting tubes turned up on your doorstep, you wouldn't turn them down, right?
That's what I was
wouldn't turn
thinking.
them down, but
This
yeah.
box showed up at the end of the gate.
Yeah. So I guess that's always a possibility, but we should have turned off the recording for this meeting while we were saying that,
What kind of tube is it? While we're talking about tubes.
Bill, was it 4CX 5000? Bill Yates still out there? Where'd he go?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay.
You got a 4CX 15,000 for the final, and you get the 4CX or 4CX 350s in the driver assembly.
No, those don't come from Russia, do they?
Yeah, if they're from Svetlana, we're in trouble.
We actually had some land years ago, but it's been many years since we've give them any business.
Yeah, we actually, when the Soviet Union collapsed and the Svetlana became popular, we actually bought some because they were so inexpensive, but then we were told not to buy from the Russians. So now we buy from the Chinese. So I don't know. It's one of
So
those.
Matt, I understand the Poudre Valley REA paid a visit the other day. So they're going to write you up in their magazine, huh?
That's correct. They are. Yeah, because we're such a good customer. I think the number is about $500 a day for electricity. So we're very popular with them. So they brought us some coffee mugs to show their appreciation. So
Was that a donation of a coffee mug?
yes, donated coffee mugs to yeah, I have a feeling they might have been clearing off their shelves or emptying their lockers out or something, but we appreciate it anyway. So is there any other follow-up questions on any of that stuff I just covered?
Is there any need or do you guys get your fingers in the time code generator every few years when we have to do a leap second at the start of each year?
Well, I tell you that the leap second thing is, I think it was 2016 that we did the last leap second. It's been a long time, and they voted actually to do away with the leap second because they thought it would become too frequent, and it's actually, interestingly enough, become infrequent. And there's been a lot of news about maybe we'll have to do a negative leap second, but I don't think that would ever happen. What's interesting is our time code generators aren't really set up to do negative leap seconds. It was always, the Earth is slowing down. It was always supposed to be a positive leap second. So interesting times, but I don't think we'd ever see a negative one.
You mentioned having to set it for daylight savings time, but you're on universal time. Where does daylight savings come in?
Well, it's just when we transmit the time code for daylight saving time in those places that observe daylight saving time, like here in Colorado. Is
that in the 100 hertz code?
Yes. Yes,
got it.
In the 60 hertz code too. Also, it's in there, and that handles the radio clock.
Yeah, that's true. WWVB has it.
Yeah. So, and we still get the occasional letter saying we're broadcasting the wrong hour, because they don't recognize it as UTC and they think it should. And at one time it was Mountain Time that was broadcast in the early days of WWV, and then they switched it over to Universal Time. But
that must have been a while ago, though.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
I don't think I ever heard it on Mountain Time. I certainly heard CHU on Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah, so I don't remember when they switched it, but yeah, they did switch. So that means probably when it was on the East Coast, it was probably Eastern Time that they were broadcasting. So they, at some point here, probably in the 70s, changed it over to, it must have been early 70s. They changed it over to UTC. So, yeah, so we, let's see, where am I in my questions here? Someone asked here, was the station attended 24/7 originally? And yes, it was. It's always, until about I think the early 1970s, it's always had a 24/7 staff. If it was broadcasting all day long, 24/7, it had a staff out there that amount of time. And then they did decide that it could be automated and started, well, not completely automated, but enough to reduce the staff down to just a 9 to 5 job, Monday through Friday. And so they just started building auto restart circuitry for the transmitters, and also, the generator auto restart. So a lot of it took care of itself. You had the auto restart. If there was a loss of a transmitter, a primary transmitter, a secondary one would start up. And essentially the staff, you could listen from home. You'd get a phone call from what was a Denver burglar alarm at the time. They had all the alarm systems running through the buildings, and they would call us at home on the landline and say, you got some sort of alarm going off at the radio station. And so if you turned on your shortwave next to your bed, you could listen to the frequencies. If they're all there, you went back to bed and took care of it in the morning. If there was a dead one, you get up and go out to the station. There was other things like air conditioning alarms, the rooms where the equipment, back in the older days, the equipment was a lot more sensitive to temperature changes. And so you monitored, alarms coming from the screen rooms also. But soon, and when I started, they would hand you a pager. You took turns with the pager. They'd also paid you, and if you weren't at home when they called, and you would call in and find out what sort of problem there is. And certainly with the advent of cell phones, a lot more things are possible. We've added improvements over the years to monitoring different things. The staff has built things that you can call in to a certain number and get the status of the station. It sends you a text message back. And one of the things that we had to overcome was a lot of times, particularly these 60 kilohertz, the WWVB transmissions, the transmitters wouldn't automatically transmit or change over to a different transmitter. If you lost a transmitter, you had to go out and manually switch it over. Or what often happened was that there would be a lightning strike nearby, and it would overload the transmitter, and all it took was a reset. You'd go out and push a reset button, and instead, so you drive out there middle of the night, push the stupid button, and you get home, and then be another lightning strike, as soon as you're getting back in bed. And so that was one thing that Bill said, we got to overcome this. So we've got ways now of getting into the system and using some software and pushing the reset button from home. And we've actually gotten some money about 2 years ago to put in a matrix switch where we could switch between transmitters. So that's improved our quality of life quite a bit, to be able to remote in and do those kind of simple things. And there's certainly other things to be done that could improve, that type of annoying, weekend evening things.
And that matrix switch that you were talking about, that was actually a physical switch. You had to go physically push to switch the antennas. Is that correct?
Yes, it was sort of a plunger that you'd pull out and turn and push another one in and turn it. And so you had 3 transmitters, and then there was 2 antennas that we broadcast from simultaneously, and a dummy load. So you have to pick and choose which transmitter, and it was very versatile. You could put any transmitter into any load, which was nice for troubleshooting. So now that's been automated, motorized, so that's very nice.
How big is your dummy load for 50 kilowatts?
Yeah, well, we can, we got 50 kilowatt. You can put 50 kilowatts into it. It's you've seen it, big box of resistors. It's just baseboard heaters inside of the metal cage, but and with a big fan on it. And but it comes in handy for breaking in tubes and things like that. And 50 ohm load is all that it is. So
now, you said that did I gather you were involved with the upgrade to WWVB?
Yes. Back in the was mid to late 90s.
Yeah, I remember when that happened, and I was always curious. I know you repurposed the WWVL antenna. Was it the same design as WWVB's? So it was an easy switch, or did you have to really change things over?
Yeah, it was actually a fairly easy switch. What happened was that what was inside there, the Helix house, they had all this Litz wire. It was a very loosely built transformer, and there was many turns of Litz wire. And, it was like 2 stories tall, and then it was a balanced line. Transmission line came down, and there was a loop or 2 inside from coming down the transmission line into that large coil of Litz, and all that stuff was torn out, gutted out, and we acquired other surplus from Annapolis, large tuning coils, and some of it was fabricated for us to be installed, and it all was so much easier to work on. It's so much better today than it was, back in the early 90s. It was like a Frankenstein experiment that for some reason, everyone figured it would keep on working just fine. And yeah, it definitely needed to be more solid than it was. And so, yeah, that ice storm sort of kicked everyone in the pants, and they got everyone started on thinking about upgrading the station. So,
well, that upgrade made all the difference up here in the Northeast.
Well, yes, yeah, we got phone calls from people and emails saying that they'd never seen the signal before. They had radio controlled clocks that didn't work, and all of a sudden
they never worked up here. I'm in New Hampshire, and
yeah,
I know Radio Shack was selling them. I said those don't work here.
Yeah,
but after the upgrade, now they do. Because it was
problem,
just right at the noise level.
Yeah, and part of the problem was you're also being jammed by the station in England, that 60 kilohertz. So,
right.
New England has their own set of problems there. But yeah, to get back to your question, I sort of got sidetracked there. Is the north antenna, which had been WWVL, was virtually identical to WWVB's antenna, and so we just put them together in parallel. And wavelength wise, the wavelength at 60 kilohertz is 5 kilometers, and so the antennas are very close to each other and can be thought of as one element almost. And the pattern is virtually omnidirectional, even though it's coming from 2 different driven elements. But there is a slight 1 dB gain east and west from having the antennas. They're about, I think, 800 meters apart, the radiating elements. And so, yeah, it was the north antenna, the WWVL antenna, was just sitting there rotting, not being used for anything, and it was nice to reincorporate it back into the broadcast.
Speaking of those antennas, how much wire do you have buried in the ground under those?
Oh, there's 300 radials radiating out from each helix house, and they go out probably about 100 yards in every direction at each helix house, and some of them quite close to the surface, and they've been damaged and cut a few times, but there's quite a bit, and the ground conductivity is very high, so that helps a lot also.
I take it you don't have the power budget to de-ice the antennas like NAA does.
Yeah, that was one of the ideas that was originally visited, was just connecting to the substation, the power grid, and disconnecting from the transmitter and heating the antenna up. But the system we got is so much better because we have a lot more tuning, and the higher power obviously helps a little bit. Doesn't help, on a day like today when it's 0. If it was iced up, it wouldn't help anything, but it probably helps de-ice the antenna when it's just a little below freezing, which is we'll
Yeah,
take.
NAA apparently that takes twice as much power to de-ice the antenna as their radiated power,
Right, yeah.
their
So,
actual transmit power.
yeah, so that's one of the big disadvantages of having it up there in the wet and cold northeast. So, are any other questions about those items? Okay, well, I'll move on. Oops, here's a question. It says, what are some of the unexpected events that have happened at the station? And probably one that jumps to my memory and probably Bill's, everybody else at the station, was February 2001. Out of nowhere, a insulator failed on one of the towers. It was a backstay insulator on the top guy wire. There's 3 guy wires as a tower, and then there's a set of 3 guy wires, low one, midpoint, and a high one. And the high one is the one that snapped, which sadly was an insulator that had been. Oh, actually, the insulator didn't fail. It was a pin that was holding the insulator, and sadly, it was the Navy was helping us with the upgrade. We had some Navy guys that experts that one of them suggested replacing the pins that had been in the lap insulators for 40-50 years, and they said maybe it's time to replace those, and they replaced them all, and there's 72 of them, and one of them had a tiny defect in it, and it slowly pulled apart over the course of about 2 years or so, whatever it was in there, and finally the top of the pin broke, and then let the guy wire free. And what was interesting to look at was where it failed. You could see it had cracked, and there was almost like tree rings in there. Every time it failed a little bit more and a little bit more until it got to a point where it just pulled apart. You could see sort of clamshell shaped tree rings inside there that were marked. I don't know if it was a freeze thaw, how long that damage had been there, but sort of like it was just markers as it failed and failed and failed, and then finally it just reached a point it couldn't hold it anymore. So of course I was horrified, and I think the other guys too were at least very shocked. We'd never seen anything like that before. And the top of the tower had leaned over quite a bit out of the vertical. And so we needed to replace that, to repair that. And we were hoping that we could pull back on it, on that broken guy wire, and pull back the tower into a straight vertical position. But it developed sort of an S-shaped curve in one of the tower sections, which was unsafe. So hired a crane and a crew to come out to replace all that, had a new tower section fabricated, and they destacked the antenna and put the new tower section in and topped it off. We had to build a road out to that antenna because it was the most northern antenna in the antenna field, and it was just across sort of prairie and dirt to get out there. So had to build a small road to get out there, and like I said, hire the crane and the crew and have the parts built, and took about 6 months from failure until end. I think it was June. It failed in February and finally was repaired in June. We did manage to use the other 3 towers to hold up a sort of triangle section of antenna, top hat, and we kept on radiating. We retapped the variometer for the different impedance, and we went back on the air. So it wasn't as much power as we're used to, but it was better than nothing to get us back on the air. And so unfortunately, that same insulator that we replaced it with, that one failed again 2 years later. But we had the road built. We knew who the crane people were and all the crew and everything. We called them again 2 years later and said, got to do it again. So that was rather unfortunate thing. So so we bought some more insulators that were more robust and haven't had any problems since then, thankfully. So, but Billy, pardon?
You have to have a crane taller than 400 feet to lift a 400-foot tower. How does that work?
That they're very rare. We actually went searching for 400-foot, just a little over 400-foot cranes, and there was 2 of them in northern Colorado. And what was interesting was, I think one was working at the Budweiser plant at the time, and then there was another one working at Coors. So we're like, we didn't know what the correlation was between 400-foot cranes and breweries, but we hired one of them. They came out and took care of it, and yeah, the top of the crane just barely above where we needed it to be. It was just high enough that we could lift those tower sections. And of course, some of the guys got basket rides. They'd put a basket on the crane and take you up 400 feet. But I stayed on the ground where it was safe. So yeah, and you don't want some crane operator think it's funny to pull the levers and drop you a little bit and scare you and stuff. Yeah, it's just no good. So I stayed down on the ground where it was safe. So, but the other guys, the crew, there's 4 of us at the radio station, and 3 of them enthusiastic about climbing towers, love it, think it's great. We all went through training for tower climbing for safety reasons, and of course the training, it paid for itself within the first year. We had incandescent tower lights at the time, and we were constantly calling up people to climb the towers, replace a light bulb. It was like $500 just for them to show up on site, before they even climbed a tower. And then they'd go up, and then you had to think, well, if 1 or 2 bulbs went out, are some others ready to go out? Should we have them all done? And so it was very expensive. And having the crew, the 3 guys that would climb the towers available, was very nice, because as the beacons went out, they'd go up, and they actually qualified for some additional, I forget what it's called, high risk pay or something like that, for doing something like that. And I don't think anyone ever applied for it, but they climb them. We haven't, and here's another story, is that we had those incandescents replaced with LEDs, and so those don't go out as much, and so there's not as much tower climbing. And so Bill's been prodding us, saying we gotta, everyone's got to stay trained, so we can, when they do go out, when there are problems, or there's a shiv at the top of the antenna that needs to be at the top of the tower, it needs to be greased every now and then. So when the weather turns nice, they'll go back up the towers. So I'll stay on the ground where it's safe, keep an eye on them, watch them with binoculars. So yeah, it's nice to have guys that are willing to do the tower climbing, and has saved the government a lot of money, saved the station a lot of money.
Have you found that the LED replacement bulbs are live up to their life expectations?
We did have one, I think, early on fail. And so, that of course worried us a little bit, that, maybe these aren't as good as they say they are. But after that original failure, everything else is, some of the side markers have gone out, but we've also been told by the FAA that they're phasing out side markers. I think it has to do with birds and migratory birds, I guess, get confused by the tower lights and such, and so they're it's a voluntary thing, but you can turn out side markers, and some of the beacons even. So I think that's the direction we're heading. But yeah, we went from, each beacon was over 200 watts, if I remember right, incandescent bulbs, and now we're down to 50 watts, and did cause some problems with the neighbors. We went to the incandescent ones are nice, because they're nice. they come on slowly and they reach their maximum brightness, and then they dim slowly, and they're kind of, you know, soothing to look at and everything, and very nostalgic. And the LEDs, of course, they're on, they're off, and they're very harsh. And the beacons are actually designed, they're like a cake cover plate. You've got the LEDs inside, and then a sort of clear dome over the top, much smaller than the original beacon lights. And they're actually designed to avoid light from going down to the ground. So they're made so the light goes out horizontally. But unfortunately, just east of the radio station, about 6 miles away, there's actually a ridge. I think it's in Weld County, even. It's that far away, but it's a ridge that had a few homes on it. And for those people, they said it was very bright. And we were caught up in an argument with them for many years about what to do about those LED lights. And we couldn't go back to the incandescents because we couldn't paint the towers anymore. The towers had lead-based paint on them, and they had to be abated. And that was like $1 million a tower. We couldn't afford that. And so we said, let's just go with the beacons. But then the neighbors were like, the beacons, it was a small group of people living on that ridge. And, in the end, we had to say, this is what the FAA specified. It's not out of tolerance. This is what it is. And so they weren't happy about it, but it was one of those things where you have to say something like, well, we were here first. I hate saying that, but it comes down to that sometimes. It's like the station was here 1962 and those homes were built in 1980 or something. So you don't like to make enemies out of your neighbors, but sometimes we just had no other direction to head. And I did see a note in there from Darren, said to remind me to mention that we use drones, a drone, to inspect the towers now, and that also cuts down on the climbing a little bit, because obviously when the guys went up to change a beacon, they would look at how everything was looking on the way up and on the way down. And so since there's less climbing going on, we have gone through a series of drones to fly up and down the antennas, the towers, and inspect the antenna from the ground. So, and also get some great shots, I guess, that show up on different websites. Well, or any other beacon tower climbing questions?
Well, I would assume that the towers have some stated life. Are you approaching the life of those, or can you extend them forever with proper maintenance, or what happens?
We've had them inspected, the guy wires inspected, and and that seems like it was just yesterday, but it's probably been 10-15 years. We've had the guy wires inspected and the towers inspected, and they seem to be holding up quite well. The dry Colorado environment, I think they're probably going to last a long time. Obviously, there's things that could be going on internally, as we've found out. Sometimes there's a little crack here or there, and the wind and the cold and the heat slowly expand that crack, and you just don't know when something's going to surprise you one morning. So, but I don't know if they've given us ever said what the lifetime was of the tower. Obviously there's other radio towers in harsher conditions that are older than ours that are holding up well, but maybe they do special maintenance on them. I'm not sure.
You mentioned having to build a special tower section. Do you have spare sections?
We currently do not. We don't have any spare sections, but the one that we did install was fabricated here in town. And maybe Bill remembers how many we had how many had to be replaced. I seem to remember it was just one or two sections each time. I can't remember the exact number, but yeah, they were fabricated here in town, painted here in town. And what's interesting is if you look really closely at the tallest tower, or not the tallest, the most northern tower, the paint pattern is a little wonky. The spacing of the orange and white got confused at some point in the building of the tower sections, and the pattern is off if you look at the so, but we don't paint the towers anymore, so it'll fade away someday. All right, well, I guess that brings us back to unexpected events. As I mentioned, the reinstating of the 25 megahertz was sort of an unexpected event. It was just something that was brought up quickly one day, and it was reinstated, and I think everyone's fairly happy that we did that. We did get all new transmitters at WWV. Bill was instrumental in acquiring some FRT 96 Collins transmitters from the Navy that were surplus. So we've lived off of a lot of surplus transmitters in our day. Still all vacuum tube. We have some Class C transmitters, the high power ones, the 10 kilowatt ones at 5 megahertz, 10 megahertz, and 15 megahertz are the high power ones. Those are Class C transmitters. Those we did have to pay for, were designed for us and paid, but just about everything else was surplus and donated to us. And also, I think it was Lemoore up in North Dakota, when they went out of business, the Loran station, some guys at the station and then some folks from Boulder at the Boulder site went up to Lemoore and helped load up surplus insulators and Litz wire and things like that, and brought them back to Colorado, and those were instrumental during the upgrade. So a lot of things just fell into our lap right at the right time back at the end of the 90s. And the surplus transmitters that Bill got, the HF ones, were earlier this decade. I think it was 2008, somewhere around there. And so got some new transmitters at WWV. We did have some Class A transmitters, which are of course very expensive to run. Some TMC from New York. Forget the name of the town in New York, but the TMC transmitters. Those were the original ones at WWV. We got rid of them. Unfortunately, they went to the scrap yard. I know a lot of people would like to have them in their basement, but that's another problem the government has. Is you can't give stuff away or sell it or anything like that. And so yeah, a lot of that went for scrap. And yeah, and we're replaced with the new to us Collins transmitters and the CCA transmitters. What was interesting is the Class C transmitters, we purchased and replaced the TMCs because, going from Class A to Class C saved a lot of power. But ironically, we had to install some space heaters for in the wintertime. Sometimes the TMCs used to heat the building. The waste heat from the transmitter heated it, and kept things warm in the wintertime. And so then when we got the Class C, we had to add some heaters to help supplement the heat that was lost. So it's one of those things that was like maybe wasn't well thought out at first, but that's the way it goes. But probably reduces the heat load in the summertime. So trying to think what else. Yeah, that are some of the major changes I can think of over the years that we've had. Let's see. If anyone's interested in the history of WWV, Glenn Nelson's going to give a very excellent talk on the history. I actually did some history talks that I thought were pretty good, and then Glenn did one, and I don't ever want to give my talk again because his was so good compared to what I did. But WWV did start in Washington, D.C. at a radio building, and I was fortunate enough to go on a trip to the DC area a couple years ago, 2019. Yeah, it was 2019, right before the 100th anniversary, and went to see where the original transmitter site was in Washington, D.C. And it's actually, all the buildings have been knocked down, and it's actually the Kuwaiti embassy and is sitting, I think, on the same site that used to be WWV, the original WWV. And it was another Middle Eastern site, or another embassy there. And I had a piece of paper. I was looking at an old aerial photograph of the area, trying to find out where the exact location was. And so I was wandering up and down the street, talking to myself and taking a lot of pictures. And the guards started coming out of their guard shacks, and looking at me. So I think I was making people nervous. And as I left, the cops did show up. I don't know if that was coincidence, but they may have called the cops to come watch me. But then I went to, if you ever have a chance to go to the Goddard Space Flight Center Visitor Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, that's where the WWV was in the 1960s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, until it moved here in Fort Collins. I got to go see that building. And of course, the people, you walk into the building and talk to the people behind the desk at the visitor center. And of course, they've never heard of WWV. And they told me, no, this building's never been a radio station, and so on and so forth. But I did meet one person who did know what it was, and confirmed it. And he actually gave me a tour. They had torn up some carpet, and they found the trenches for the wiring and for the airflow, the cooling. They'd found those, and they were very perplexed as to what they were looking at. They were like, what is all this stuff in the floor? They didn't know that transmitters had been there, and so on and so forth. So we were actually able to exchange some information and pictures to help them understand the history of their building. So, but anyway, like I said, Glenn gives a great talk. That was just a very short one. It started in DC and ended up in Fort Collins. So, and it's been in Fort Collins, 55 some years now.
The talk that Glenn's going to give on Thursday night, we're going to have that streamed, and it'll be on YouTube. I'll get the information up on our website, the WWV ARC website. But it'll be available that Thursday.
That'd be excellent, because I'd like to go to listen to the talk, but I don't want to take up room from people that haven't heard the talk before. And so if it was streamed, that would be great. Be able to sit outside.
And there's still a lot of room to come and be there in person.
Okay. I'll play it by ear and see how crowded it gets. But yeah, it's an excellent talk. Here I have a question from Jim Farmer, K4BSE. How are time and frequency standards transferred from NIST's Boulder laboratory to the WWV transmitter site? And that's a good question. That's a very common one, because obviously when you start talking about precision time signals, you start having to take in consideration, speed of light being a limit, and getting information moved from one place to another. And what they actually came up with, and I'm sure it's been around a long time, something called Common View. And I've actually tried to make a illustration here of it, of an analogy where you have a clock tower in the middle of a town, and you have a person with a wristwatch here and one with a wristwatch here. And at 12 noon, you agree to both look at, the tower and note your time at exactly 12 noon. And then you get together and compare your watches. And in this example, it's 12 noon here, and this watch says 12:05 and this one says 11:55. And if this by definition is the time standard or the correct time, then this guy is 10 minutes off. And so the clock tower falls out of the equation, because then you can compare the two watches afterwards. And and it doesn't even have to be immediately afterwards. You just sooner or later you talk to each other and you say, this is what time I had at 12 noon. This is what time I had. And like I said, one of them by definition is the time scale or the reference. And so then the other one just has to set itself. So what they use now is GPS is the talk, the clock tower, and and WWV looks at the GPS, and so does the Boulder time scale. Our time scale looks at it, Boulder time scale looks at it, and then we used to do it by modem. I remember early in the morning downloading the data from the Boulder GPS receiver and subtract the two, and by definition, the time scale in Boulder is the reference, and so we'd adjust our clocks to match theirs, and GPS falls out of the equation. And it was a problem for a lot of people. They're like, you're using GPS as a reference, and it's like, not really. You could use I've heard people say you could use a Mickey Mouse watch. And if you're just both looking at it at the same instant, it strikes 12 noon, you know what time you have. So it's one of those things. Before GPS, they used a television station, Channel 7 in Denver, for the common reference between they would both look at Channel 7. There was something called line 10, and and the analog had certain timing in it, and you would just compare your time references to when you're both receiving that time pulse in line 10, and then share the data and set your clock that way. And of course, that's been replaced by GPS, but there is a program afoot right now with people experimenting with bringing back a television, common view type of thing for local distribution of time, very accurate time transfer. And it's all stems from, a lot of people, everyone loves GPS. I love GPS, but a lot of people are worried it's susceptible to jamming, or something could be done to the satellites to disable them, and we need a backup. And of course, nobody wants to build commercial.
Hey, Matt, did we sign an NDA on any of that? And are you going anywhere you're not supposed to?
I don't think we signed anything, but yeah, I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna talk about who's doing it or what. But I mean the common view. I feel like common view using line 10 has been public information for a long time, and it's just a revival of it. Anyone's able to do that.
It would seem that common view scenario would result in WWV's clocks being adjusted. And how do users note or see then that your time signal is subject to that adjustability, or doesn't it happen very often?
What we have now is a time scale, a bank of cesiums. We've consolidated our cesiums and actually added a few to them to build a time scale at the radio station. And it is actually over, we don't have to monitor it or take care of it anymore. But it used to be, in the old days, we would just, you can actually move the time code generator very small amounts. And you can also tweak the cesiums very small amounts, so it would drift, very, very slowly. But now that the time scale is so accurate, the accuracy and stability is way beyond, what we need at the radio station. So it's actually steered much smaller increments. You know, the common view is done continuously all day long, and there's all these programs and algorithms and stuff that keep the cesium steering in the right direction. So yeah, it's you know, especially at HF, even the cesiums, the signal that we produced in the screen room and sent to the antenna, you know, is accurate to 10 to the minus 13, you know, frequency wise. But by the time the ionosphere gets done with it, the ionosphere really distorts. It's down to about 10 to the negative 7 or 10 to the negative 6 frequency wise. And obviously a lot of studies going on, you know, about that too.
I watch it from here, from London, Ontario, and I have seen the carrier smeared over about 3/4 of a hertz. So, you know, I mean, and it's not moved, it's smeared.
Yeah.
There's multiple paths happening, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a effect called spread F.
Yeah, exactly.
The
Delta F.
ionosphere is definitely, yeah, is involved with that.
Yeah, so that kind of thing, you know, our you know, the technology for producing, you know, timing from cesiums and everything is you know, got to the point where we can't reproduce it. You know, now WWVB gets close. It's mostly ground wave, very stable. And so if you average it for, I think, you know, 24 hours or whatever, you can recover the frequency of that you would get from a cesium standard. So any other questions or comments about any of that we just covered?
There's a good article in QST about that same thing you're just talking about, Matt, as to what's the theoretical limit to be able to receive WWV. So,
yeah,
excellent article, really well written, and it was kind of shocking to see my name and call sign in the article, but it was thrilling to see that, Dave, you were also involved in gathering some data for that.
Is that the most recent one?
yeah, so this is the March issue of QST. And the author is Mike Lombardi. That's Bill and Matt's boss is the one that wrote the article. And our event in 2019 got him sparked to get him back into ham radio. And so I'm really glad that all of you guys are active hams now too. It's very, very neat.
So this is Rob. Can you hear me?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm using Zoom from my phone, which I don't usually do. I'm familiar with Common View. I served on an FCC working group. So if folks were interested in looking for other modes that we explored for local time and frequency and phase transfer, we were looking to get some more redundancy into it, because as you said, people love their GPS, but what if the GPS stops working or interfered with or what have you? So if you Google for FCC CISRIC, that's Charlie Sierra Romeo India Charlie 5, working group 4B, I think you'll find some other ways that we explored to transfer time in our final report.
Yeah, I know for a while that, you know, people wanted Loran to stay on the air as a backup to GPS, but nobody wants to pay for Loran, and nobody wants to pay for building, you know, nobody wants to build receivers that nobody's going to build or buy until GPS goes away.
36 million bucks a year. It's a drop in the bucket, but the government couldn't scrape it up.
Yep. So yeah, that's sort of the paradox, is you need the backup system, but nobody wants to pay for it.
So I hate to bring it up, but it's 20 to 8 here in Colorado. You guys on the East Coast, 20 till 10. And I think I don't have the Zoom meeting going past 2 hours, so.
Okay. Well, I can come back.
Other questions that folks have, that would be good to.
Yeah. Well, I can certainly come back for another meeting and finish up. I'll be in San Diego for a new baby on in March, but maybe in April.
Oh, we would love to have you back. That'd be
I
good.
think that would be terrific. Yeah.
Next month is going to be Jeff Sherman from the Boulder Lab, and he's going to be our guest. He's going to talk about atomic clocks and timekeeping at NIST. It's pretty broad, but he's going to talk about the physical basis for timekeeping and the fundamental role, all kinds of neat stuff. He is a PhD from the University of Washington and came to NIST in 2009. He works on the optical atomic frequency reference, which is becoming, as the standard of the fountain. And he did some work on the internet time base too. So he'll be a pretty interesting person to have. We'll have and then Matt, if you come back, we'll probably have questions after we hear Jeff. So
okay,
that'll be good. That'll be wonderful.
I would just wonder if I could ask one last one, because there's something that I was curious about. WWVH, and I realize that's maybe not directly you're directly involved with it, Matt. But how many? What's the staff there? Are they hams? Is there any interaction with the local amateur radio community in WWVH that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. Surprisingly, there's no hams out there, and there was one for a very short time. But nobody else is you'd think people working in the HF radio realm would be very interested in getting those in. And I got my license. I wasn't really interested in HF. I was interested in the repeaters in the local area, and such were very interesting. And so yeah, and then recently 2 other guys at the station have their tickets now. But I know in the past history there've been a lot of hams gone through WWV and VH over the years.
Fred, your question is kind of interesting because we're trying to develop that relationship with hams on Kauai for the modulation experiment that NIST is doing with the Hamside group. So,
well, and Tim had the fabulous idea of trying to do a special event station sometime that was time zone based. And one of the time zones would be Hawaii, but we don't have any club members in Hawaii. And I was just wondering if any of the WWV members or H members were hams, and because we're eventually going to need some Hawaii ham radio club members.
Of course, we need an excuse to go on a tour.
That too.
Absolutely. That too. Yeah. Well, Matt, I want to thank you for being here tonight. And
you're welcome.
Kevin, thank you for ushering in all the questions too.
Sure. I was just thinking, I wonder if we need to keep that channel open in case other questions come up. I know that we haven't covered all of the questions that were submitted because we just didn't have time, but if additional things come up, I think what we did before is just had you email me, right? Is that what we did? So we can do that again. Did we have to do that directly? I think we do have to still do that directly, right? We don't have a email through the website.
You've got an email. Yeah, you're vice president at WWVARC.
Okay. So yeah, is it vice president or VP?
Vice president. You have to spell it out.
Okay. So vice president so I don't email myself. So what can you say?
Yes, you are the vice president.
Well, I know that, but I didn't know how the email was set up. So yeah,
I agree. That's good.
If you want to email me further questions that I can relate to Matt, and do one of two things, or both, or all of the above, is certainly have him back to talk some more. And maybe that's a column for our website as well. and
Matt.
various things. Yeah, yeah,
Just what Matt wants is something else to do.
yeah, exactly. Well, we can do it a little at a time, so it's not overwhelming. But anyway, correspond with me if you have things that come up that you'd like to find out about, and we'll see what we can do.
All right. Well, thank you, Kevin.
Others can speak for themselves, but I just want to thank you, Matt, for taking time. It was fabulous.
Oh yeah,
Thanks
very
a lot.
much. Yeah.
Yeah, Matt, I
Yes,
want to
thank
say
you.
thank you. I'm actually flying out to Boulder Tuesday of next week to be able to be taking part in the tours of WWV and WWVB and NIST. So it's kind of keen, obviously. It's really thrilling to hear that, like many other radio stations, you take requests and put another frequency on the air. I think that was great. I was listening to the 25 meg earlier this afternoon, and here it was about 15 dB stronger than the 20 megahertz carrier. So I was quite surprised at that. Yeah, so much appreciated.
Oh, you're all welcome very much.
Very cool. Well, I don't think we have any other business for tonight. We'll put up the information about the streaming of the programs next Thursday. We'll put that up on the website, and that'll be right on the front page. And I think that's about it. So appreciate everybody coming out tonight.
One additional thing I forgot to mention is regarding the special event station. It starts on March 6th. RJ and Doug are hoping to be able to run satellite as well as another band mode, if you will. So if some of you are trying to work those stations, I guess you can talk to RJ and Doug as to exactly what they're planning on doing. We've got some logistical issues to work out just to make sure that logs and things can be handled properly for that. But that's a mode that's not shown on our operator worksheet at this point, but it'd be a great addition if we can figure out how to make it work.
Well, RJ had done some in the past before, so and noted that RJ, I got forwarded from Fred that we want to make sure that there are a couple other fields going into the log. So we'll work that out between now and next week.
Yeah, and it's pretty straightforward. I can walk you right through it.
Okay, we'll work on that. Thanks, RJ. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. I hope you all have a great night. Stay warm if it's cold, and we'll see you in a month, but we'll have some activities going on next week as well.
Great meeting. Thanks all.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thanks.
And Rob, what's your call sign? What's your call sign?
Yeah, I apologize for having the phone without the call sign put on it. It reverts back between calls. This is Alpha India 4 Uniform Charlie.
Oh, okay, yeah, gotcha. Thank you. Alpha India 4, right? You're in Virginia. Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
All right, thanks, Rob. I was trying to.
I need to sign up for a plurality of time slots to work remote too.
Okay, well, you're going to talk to Gary and Fred, and I think I've got that up on the announcement to contact them about signing up.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and you let me know if there's any issues, and we'll get you connected with those guys.
Yep.
Yeah, Rob, just shoot me an email. Shoot me an email with your address. You have to have it has to be linked to a Google account because it's a Google Docs thing. So whatever you use to log into Google with.
Yeah, I did the one last fall, and I think I was still on your list from 2019.
All right. Well, we've definitely got you on there, but we have to. It's a different sheet, so he has to re-grant the permissions to get to.
Oh, okay. Okay, sounds good. I'll go ahead and try to set that.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you so much.
All right, good night, everybody.
Good night.
I'm gonna hit the
Have a good one.
I'm gonna hit the kill switch here.
Take care.
See you all.